Hi everyone, Dani here. Welcome to Spenelli Speaks. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing well. Today I have a video for you that I hope helps you with some reading of bigger books. Because if you're anything like me, bigger books are quite a feat and sometimes don't get finished. So if you are new here, I hope you take some time, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell, and follow along for all of my tips, tricks, reviews, and all that fun stuff when it comes to reading. Now, like I said, today's video is going to be about big books. And like I said, if you're like me, sometimes it's hard to read a really big book. Now, I have put together 5 tips that work for me. So there may be other tips that people have for you for big books. If you have any additional tips that you want to share with me and others, please put those in the comments. These are simply the tips that have worked for me in reading big books. Now, what I'm going to do is go from my number 5 down to my number 1 tip. So my number 5 tip is probably something that everyone thinks is blasphemy, but it truly helps me really get grounded in the story. And yes, it does get really spoilery, but I use it in a pinch. Like if I just can't connect with a book, I will use my number 5 tip, which is, if it's available, watch the movie. And I only say this because sometimes when you're reading a big book, there are a lot of characters and you can't keep them straight. You can't keep the plot straight. So by watching the movie, sometimes your mind can connect the two. And yes, then you're seeing the movie characters in the book, but I'm telling you, if I am in a really dire situation and I cannot keep things connected, I will watch the movie. It's usually with classics that this happens, but all I'm saying is it works sometimes. I'm not saying you have to do it. This is my number 5 tip, but in a pinch, I will watch the movie and then finish reading the book. Now, my number 4 tip is a little similar, but doesn't involve spoilers, and that is to listen to the audiobook while you are reading. So this one really helps me when I get halfway through a big book and I just can't seem to push past that halfway point. There were 2 books specifically that this happened to me recently: Eye of the World by Robert Jordan and The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory. And I got halfway through both of these books and then they sat on my nightstand for like a year because I couldn't bring myself to finish them. I just knew I still had like 300 pages left and I just couldn't bring myself to finish these books. So I downloaded the audiobooks and I read along so that I was still like reading. And I typically listen to audiobooks as well, but I really wanted to be able to see the words as I had read half the book by visual reading. So that helped out so much. I ended up finishing both of the books within 3 days. So sometimes just grabbing the audiobook and reading along and really pushing through, say for instance saying, okay, today I'm going to listen to an hour of the book. And depending on your speed, especially if you're reading along, you can go really quickly and get the book done. So audiobook is my number 4 tip. Now, my number 3 tip seems really obvious, but for some people, I don't think it is. And that is to pick something you like. If you don't like French literature, do not read Les Mis. This is a lot to read when you don't like French political Renaissance. Like, it's a huge book. If you don't like Russian literature, don't pick Anna Karenina. Again, this is a huge book. Just because other people say something is great doesn't mean you're going to like it. Don't read it if you have no interest in Russian times. It's not going to happen. Same thing if you don't like British literature. You're not going to like London if you don't like Britain. So always pick something you like, because it'll be easier for you to push through when it gets a little bit tough. Now, I know there's a lot of times where you're like, okay, but I do want to read this. I don't necessarily like it, but I do want to read it. That's when I'd get involved with that audiobook. That's when I'd get involved with the movie, because if you really want to push through something, you're going to need some help. Now, my number 2 tip for reading big books is don't do it alone. And what I mean by that is, if you have a big book that you're wanting to read, do it with a buddy. Do a buddy read. Do a read along. Find where other people are reading the same book and read with them, because it's like you have a partner. You have someone to go along the road with you, and if you get stumped, you can have a discussion about it. If they get stumped, you have a discussion about it, and it's a lot more of a rewarding experience, because the way you see things in the book may be different from the way that person sees things in the book. So if you're reading a bigger book, definitely seek out someone else who also wants to read that book, or a group of people who are reading that book, because you'll probably have set timelines of when you're supposed to read things, so it'll keep you going. And like I said, when you get stumped, at least you have somebody to work it out with you. So definitely read with another person if you can. Now, my number 1 tip that has helped me through any big book, and I will take it to the grave, it is the number 1 tip I will ever have for reading big books, is you must set a realistic deadline. With big books, you cannot just mood read, sit down and be like, I'm going to read this big book. For some people, they can. Some people have an amazing time reading big books. They just sit down, they read the whole thing, and they're done. They move on to their next big book. But for some of us, and it's harder to read big books, you have to set a realistic deadline. And now I'm not saying like a week, a month. I'm saying realistic to your reading expectations. And for me, sometimes that is an entire year. Now, I'm going to use an example of a book that I've recently read and am now rereading, and that is London. So you all have heard me talk about this book, and if you follow me, you know that I'm doing a reread. This book is 1,100 pages, okay? I am not reading this in a month. All these March of the Mammoths people, holy moly, good for you. I cannot read these big books within a month. So I break this down into 100-page increments, and I say I will read 100 pages in a month. Now you may think that is silly, because 100 pages, Dani, you read 4 200 or 300 page books a month. Yes, I do. However, typically in a big book, especially if it's a classic, the content is very dense. So 100 pages in this book, I feel, can be compared to a 300-page novel. So in order for me to really understand the material, really enjoy the material, I feel like I have to set my pace way down. So for a book like this, I do give myself an entire month to read 100 pages. Now, if I read faster than that, great. If I read slower than that, okay. But with 1,100 pages, if you do the math, you should be able to get that done in 12 months, giving yourself a little bit of a cushion. And that's what we did with London. When Laura and I read London, we did 12 months. We did 100 pages per month with a little bit of a cushion in case we didn't get there, and it worked. Sometimes we had to read more, sometimes we could read less. It just depended on where we were in the book. So again, for a book like Anna Karenina, which is, I'm looking here, 800 pages long, I'd give myself at least 9 months to read this and say, I'm going to read 100 pages per month. And let me tell you, when you read books like this, sometimes you need that time. So setting a realistic deadline is very important. So look at the book. How many pages is it? How many pages do you want to read a month? How many pages do you want to get done in a certain amount of time? Maybe you are a fast reader. Maybe you can say, I'm going to read 300 pages a month and I want to get this done in 3 months. But whatever you do, set a realistic deadline and you will get that book read. So again, for all of you out there who read big books and you're a pro at it, please put in the comments some more tips for all of us people who have a really hard time reading big books. For everyone else, I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that in the comments you find something helpful. Until next time, I hope you're all reading something great, taking care, and staying safe. And as always, you know how it goes. Happy reading. Bye.